The knife wounds are still fresh on Julius Caesar's body when an 18-year-old boy across the Adriatic learns that Rome has just handed him the most dangerous inheritance imaginable. Caesar is dead. The men who killed him are calling themselves liberators. The Senate is nervous. Soldiers are waiting to see who pays them next, and Caesar's will contains a surprise. The dead dictator has adopted the teenager as his son and made him one of his main heirs. His name is Gaius Octavius. Soon Rome will know him as Octavian. Much later, the world will call him Augustus. But first, he has some people to destroy. When Caesar was stabbed to death on March 15, 44 BC, his assassins apparently expected Rome to thank them. Their logic was simple. Caesar had become too powerful, so killing him would restore the Republic. There was one small problem. Caesar was incredibly popular with large parts of the Roman public, and more importantly, with many soldiers. Then came the funeral. Mark Antony, Caesar's friend and fellow politician, helped turn public anger against the assassins. Caesar's will also promised money to Roman citizens. Crowds became furious. Some of the conspirators quickly decided that Rome was suddenly a terrible place for a vacation. Meanwhile, Octavian returned to Italy. He was young, physically unimpressive, frequently sick, and had almost no serious political experience. Basically, exactly the kind of person seasoned Roman politicians expected to manipulate. That assumption would age very badly. Octavian accepted Caesar's inheritance and, more importantly, Caesar's name. He became Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus in the way modern historians usually describe him. That name mattered. Caesar's veterans had spent years fighting under Julius Caesar. Now this teenager was presenting himself as Caesar's son. Mark Antony was not thrilled. Antony already controlled Caesar's papers and political influence. He had armies, experience, and a very large personality. Octavian had a famous dead father, and the confidence of a man who apparently had not been informed that he was 18. The two immediately began competing for Caesar's supporters. Octavian even borrowed money to pay the gifts Caesar had promised the Roman people. That was clever. He was basically telling Rome, Antony talks about Caesar. I pay Caesar's bills. Then things became stranger. The Senate, especially politicians who feared Antony, began using Octavian against him. Cicero, one of Rome's greatest speakers, attacked Antony in a series of speeches and encouraged the Senate to support Octavian's troops. The plan seems to have been something like this. Use the ambitious teenager to defeat Antony, then deal with the teenager later. Roman politics contained many excellent plans whose final step was, and then somehow everything will be fine. Everything was not fine. In 43 BC, Octavian marched on Rome. He wanted the consulship, one of the highest offices in the Republic. When political pressure was not enough, having soldiers nearby helped make the argument much more convincing. He became consul at just 19. Then he did something that must have horrified the senators who thought they controlled him. He made peace with Antony. Octavian, Antony, and another powerful commander, Lepidus, formed the Second Triumvirate. This was not just three friends agreeing to work together. They received extraordinary legal powers to reorganize the Roman state. And then came the proscriptions. Lists of enemies were published. People whose names appeared on them could be killed, and their property could be confiscated. Sometimes politics decided who appeared on the list. Sometimes personal hatred helped. Sometimes money probably made someone's property look extremely suspicious. One of the most famous victims was Cicero, the same man who had supported Octavian against Antony. Antony hated Cicero. Cicero was captured and killed. His head and hands were reportedly displayed in Rome. The alliance had made its priorities very clear. Revenge for Caesar now had government paperwork, but Caesar's actual assassins were still alive. Brutus and Cassius had gathered armies in the eastern Roman territories. So Octavian and Antony crossed into Macedonia to confront them. At Philippi in 42 BC, enormous Roman armies faced each other. This was the ugly reality behind all the speeches about liberty and tyranny. Romans were now killing Romans. To to decide which Romans would save Rome. The fighting occurred in two major battles. Octavian was ill during part of the campaign, while Antony played the stronger battlefield role. Cassius was defeated and, believing the situation hopeless, killed himself. Brutus continued fighting. Then his army was beaten as well. Brutus also took his own life. Two of Caesar's most famous assassins were dead. The revenge story could have ended there. Naturally, it did not. Because once the murderers are gone, ambitious men still remain ambitious. The Roman world was divided among the triumvirs. Antony took much of the east. Octavian controlled the west after years of messy warfare. Lepidus received territory too, although he increasingly became the third man in a partnership that clearly needed only two. Octavian still had major problems. Sextus Pompey, son of Pompey the Great, controlled Sicily and threatened Rome's grain supply with a powerful fleet. Imagine trying to become master of the Roman world while people in the capital are asking why bread is suddenly expensive. Octavian's brilliant commander and friend Marcus Agrippa eventually helped defeat Sextus. Then Lepidus made the mistake of trying to challenge Octavian. His troops abandoned him. Octavian stripped him of most of his power. Now only two giants remained, Octavian in the west, Mark Antony in the east, and Antony had become closely connected to Cleopatra, the seventh queen of Egypt. This gave Octavian exactly what he needed, a political weapon. He portrayed Antony as a Roman who had fallen under the influence of a foreign queen. The propaganda was brutal. Octavian claimed Antony was abandoning Roman traditions, favoring Cleopatra, and threatening to shift power toward the eastern Mediterranean. The real situation was more complicated. Antony remained a Roman commander with Roman supporters, and his relationship with Cleopatra served major political and military purposes. But complicated political alliance is terrible propaganda. Rome is being stolen by a dangerous foreign queen works much better. Octavian even obtained Antony's will under questionable circumstances and had parts of it publicized, claiming Antony wanted special treatment for Cleopatra and her children and wished to be buried in Alexandria. Whether every detail was presented fairly mattered less than the effect. Rome was furious. War came in 31 BC. The decisive confrontation took place near Actium, on the western coast of Greece. Agrippa's naval strategy put Antony and Cleopatra under enormous pressure. During the battle, Cleopatra's ships broke away. Antony followed. The reasons are still debated, and the popular image of Antony simply abandoning everything for love is too neat. But politically, it was disastrous. Octavian won. The following year, he invaded Egypt. Antony's position collapsed. Antony killed himself. Cleopatra soon did the same. Octavian had now defeated Caesar's assassins, eliminated rival Roman commanders, conquered Egypt, and become the most powerful man in the Mediterranean. At this point, he faced Caesar's old problem. Romans hated kings. They had just spent years killing each other, partly because Caesar had looked too much like one. So Octavian did something far smarter than simply placing a crown on his head. He pretended to give power back. In 27 BC, he formally handed certain powers to the Senate. The Senate, amazingly enough, responded by giving major powers right back to him and granting him the name Augustus. He preferred titles like princeps, meaning roughly first citizen. He was not officially called emperor in exactly the modern sense. There was no dramatic moment where someone placed an imperial crown on his head and announced that the Roman Empire had begun. Rome kept its Senate, it kept elections, it kept republican offices, and Augustus kept the armies, enormous wealth, political authority, and enough control to make sure those institutions rarely became dangerous to him. The Republic still existed on paper. Paper is very cooperative. And this is where the simple story of Augustus Avenged Caesar needs one correction. Yes, he helped destroy Brutus and Cassius. Yes, he used Caesar's murder constantly to justify his position. But Octavian was not spending 17 years driven only by grief for his adopted father. He was building power. Caesar's death gave him a name, an army, enemies, and a political cause. He used all four. That may be the darkest part of the story. The assassins killed Caesar because they feared one man was becoming too powerful. Their murder triggered civil wars that killed thousands, destroyed many of the men trying to save the Republic, and eventually produced a ruler with even more lasting control than Caesar ever achieved. Brutus and Cassius wanted to stop Rome from having a master. Instead, they helped create the conditions that allowed an 18-year-old heir to become Augustus. He did not restore Julius Caesar. He did something much more useful. He inherited his name, hunted his enemies, defeated his friends, buried the old political order under polite republican language, and ruled for more than 40 years. Rome had killed a dictator. Then Rome discovered his heir was much better at surviving.